Clara had worked at Julian Blake's mansion for nearly 3 years. Though dedicated to her work, she never expected to be called into his office for such an unusual and unexpected conversation. Julian, a renowned yet distant businessman, was facing a crisis in his company and desperately needed to win over influential investors at a dinner that evening. Lacking the time or patience to find a suitable companion, he looked at Clara, who was busy cleaning, and coldly commanded, "I need you to come to an important dinner tonight. This isn't a request, it's an order. Just go and be quiet. I need someone who'll keep to herself and stay silent." Clara was surprised but hid her reaction. Though it felt more like a command than an invitation, she saw it as an opportunity to prove something deeper. She agreed, sensing the tension and realizing this night would be far from ordinary. Clara arrived at the upscale restaurant precisely on time, wearing a tasteful, elegant dress. Julian stood at the entrance, clearly impatient. He barely looked her way, saying only, "Let's go," in a brusque tone, as if she were merely a forgettable accessory. Inside, all eyes turned to them. The investors were already seated at the center table. Introducing Clara dismissively, Julian said, "This is Clara. She's here with me tonight," without even mentioning her last name. The investors, all formally dressed and with discerning looks, gave polite nods. Some exchanged curious glances, as Clara's presence seemed unexpected and out of place. Clara took in their silent judgments but remained poised. As the dinner continued, Julian and the investors delved into discussions of profits, growth, and expansion strategies. Clara listened closely, observing every detail. At one point, Mr. Lawson, a tall man with an authoritative air, turned to her and asked in a patronizing tone, "So, Clara, what do you think of a business dinner like this?" His question implied he expected a modest response. Clara, sensing the tension around the table, could have simply smiled politely, but she chose to assert herself. "Actually, it's fascinating to witness everything firsthand," she replied calmly. "Focusing on financial projections is interesting, but understanding the people behind those numbers is just as important." Everyone fell silent, and the looks around the table froze. Clara held her composed demeanor while Julian glared at her, a mixture of surprise and irritation in his eyes. She had just expressed her own opinion, a bold move given Julian's earlier demand for silence. Mr. Lawson raised his eyebrows, intrigued by her insight. "Interesting perspective," he remarked as the other investors looked at her with new curiosity. Julian's expression grew colder. This was the opposite of the quiet evening he had planned. The evening, far from discreet, was now increasingly tense. Clara continued holding her own, aware of Julian's unease but resolute in speaking her mind. Mr. Lawson, noticing her confidence, seemed eager to hear more, perhaps drawn by her challenge to his assumptions. When the conversation shifted to corporate social responsibility, an area clearly lacking in Julian's business model, Clara took the chance to add her thoughts. Mr. Lawson turned to Julian and asked, "Does Mr. Blake consider social projects in his company?" Casting a meaningful look his way. Before Julian could respond, Clara replied, "I believe social initiatives are a meaningful way for successful companies to give back. After all, businesses exist for more than just profits." A stunned silence followed, with every eye on Clara. Despite the intense focus, she maintained her calm. Mr. Lawson, clearly impressed, smiled and said, "Exactly what I believe, Clara. It's rare to hear that around here." This comment was a subtle jab at Julian, whose expression hardened even more. He had brought her to blend into the background, and now she was attracting the very attention he wanted for himself. Annoyed, Julian finally spoke up. "It's easy to speak about things you don't understand, Clara," he said with a dismissive smirk. "Leadership carries a weight you might not grasp." Clara met his gaze directly. Without flinching, she replied, "Maybe I don't understand leadership's full weight, but I do know its impact. Sometimes those at a distance see things those at the top can't." Her unexpected response made Mr. Lawson chuckle, admiring her courage. The other investors, too, exchanged approving looks, clearly impressed by her. At that moment, Julian realized he had lost control of the evening. Unable to hide his frustration, he decided to walk out at the end of the dinner, leaving Clara behind without a word. She, however, didn't need his acknowledgement. She knew her voice had been heard, and that was what mattered most. But little did she know, this wouldn't be the end of the matter. Once back at the mansion, Julian called Clara into his office, his face full of anger. "What were you thinking, Clara?" he demanded before she could even sit down. "I brought you there to be discreet, not to steal the spotlight." Clara, calm despite his fury, replied, "I simply answered a question, Mr. Julian. I expressed my opinion, nothing more." He glared at her with disdain. "You're a housekeeper, Clara. You're not paid to have opinions at business dinners. You overstepped every boundary." Clara took a deep breath, feeling the sting of his words but refusing to let them diminish her. "If my presence bothered you so much, then why did you ask me to go?" she asked, her voice even. His tone turned cold. "You were paid to accompany me, including staying silent. Consider this your last day here. You're fired." Clara remained composed, letting his declaration wash over her without flinching. With a steady demeanor, she turned and left, feeling that the night had shown her a clearer sense of who she was and what she could accomplish. Though harsh, she saw this firing as the start of a new chapter. The following day, as she packed her things, an unexpected call came through. It was Mr. Lawson, the investor who had been intrigued by her stance at the dinner. He wanted her on his team, a role she had never imagined. Determined, Clara accepted, turning the humiliation of her dismissal into a promising new opportunity. Under Mr. Lawson's guidance in the months that followed, Clara flourished. She unlocked talents and leadership skills she never knew she had, earning the respect of her new colleagues and, finally, working in a place where her voice was valued. Meanwhile, Julian's company struggled. His arrogant decisions had alienated partners, and impulsive choices had worsened the crisis. The tide finally turned when the company Clara now worked for acquired a significant share of Julian's business, bringing her into a leadership role that crossed paths with her former employer. At a leadership meeting, Julian entered the room only to freeze when he saw Clara at the conference table. She looked at him, unfazed and calm, without a hint of resentment. After the meeting, he approached her, barely able to mask his disbelief. "So, you're here with them now?" he muttered. Clara held her ground, replying, "Yes. As you can see, our company acquired a substantial interest in yours." Julian scoffed, hiding his insecurity. "Just because you have a position here doesn't mean you understand real leadership." Clara, calm and steady, replied, "When I worked for you, I learned exactly what not to do to lead a team and how not to be blinded by arrogance." Julian, taken aback, realized she was no longer the housekeeper he had dismissed. Clara had become his biggest lesson in humility, the mirror reflecting his own failures without mercy. Julian, in a moment of frustration, told Clara that the investment he made was a calculated risk. The investor doesn't have any real control. He just wanted a small share. Nothing more, he explained defensively. Clara, with a steady gaze, challenged him. "What about our commitment to valuing people and leading with transparency? This isn't the kind of leadership we promised to build." Her words felt like a hard truth to him, leaving him feeling exposed and vulnerable. Julian, feeling resentment well up, blurted, "Why do you always expect me to fail?" "I'm trying, Clara. I really want to do what's right." Clara sighed, her gaze softening, but her voice remained firm. "It's not about wanting you to fail, Julian. It's about you truly understanding the impact of your actions. Leadership isn't just about big moves. It's about responsibility. Acting in secret only proves that you still don't get it." Julian looked away, burdened by her words. "Maybe I'll never understand it the way you want," he admitted. Clara nodded, as if expecting his response. "Maybe so, but until you do, you'll keep breaking the promises you made. That kind of responsibility can quickly become too much to bear." 2 weeks later, the board convened to discuss Julian's decision to make the deal without approval. Concerns mounted over the implications of his choice, and Clara was the first to voice her objections. "This contract represents a shift in the values we set out to uphold. Now, an external investor has a hand in our social projects, and we all understand the risks this brings." The board president, Mr. Anderson, after hearing Clara's concerns, turned to Julian, seeking his rationale. Julian, struggling to maintain his composure, explained, "I believe the investment will provide the financial strength we need to expand and make this project sustainable in the long run. Mr. Anderson, unimpressed, responded sternly, Julian, this isn't just about money. We're dealing with a mission that can't be compromised, and you acted impulsively. The pressure mounted as Julian saw the disappointment in Clara's face. It became painfully clear that he had lost not only the board's trust, but also another opportunity to show he could change. The meeting ended with the board deciding to reassess Julian's authority, possibly limiting his decision-making power going forward. Feeling defeated, Julian left the room in silence. That evening, as he sat alone, he realized that his ego and impulsive nature had been his downfall. Clara wasn't simply criticizing him. She was trying to show him a new way to lead. For the first time, Julian began to understand that the leadership he was used to had no place here anymore. On the verge of an emotional breakdown, he spent the night contemplating his choices. All he had built now felt hollow, and he understood that this collapse wasn't just the board's doing or Clara's fault. It stemmed from his own actions. For years, he had clung to selfish, short-sighted decisions, and now it was isolating him from his team, the board, and especially from Clara. The following morning, Julian arrived at the office early, determined to look within himself. Surrounded by reports and notes, he replayed Clara's words. "You're still treating this company like a profit machine," she had said. Now he began to feel the weight of those words and wonder if he ever understood true leadership. He realized that perhaps he had just been playing a role, a cold businessman obsessed with numbers. But now, with his reputation and relationships in jeopardy, he saw the need to go beyond numbers. Later that day, Clara visited him in his office. For the first time, her usual coldness was softened, as if sensing his vulnerability. Julian, weary of all the disputes, spoke honestly. "Clara," he began hesitantly, "I know I've made mistakes. I know my choices have hurt people. I understand if you think there's no point in trying anymore." Clara listened in silence, her arms crossed, though her posture hinted that she was open to his words. "This is a start, Julian," she replied, her voice softer than usual. "But acknowledging mistakes isn't enough. What do you plan to do about it?" Taking a deep breath, Julian responded, "I'm not sure yet, Clara. All I know is that I can't keep doing things the same way." Clara nodded slowly. "That's true. Real change requires daily effort. Leadership isn't about being in control all the time. It's about serving others. Are you willing to try that?" Swallowing hard, Julian replied, "Yes, I'm willing, but I don't know if I can do it alone." Clara gave a slight smile, as if seeing hope in him for the first time. "No one can do it alone, Julian. That's why real leadership is about partnerships. You have to trust people. You can't handle everything by yourself." Her words echoed in his mind. He had always tried to control everything himself, thinking that trusting others would weaken him. Now he began to see that trust was the missing piece in his journey as a leader. After a moment of silence, Clara continued, "If you're serious about change, there's a path forward, but it won't be easy. You'll have to let go of everything you thought you knew about leadership." Finally, feeling a sense of hope, Julian replied, "I'm ready to do whatever it takes. Show me how I can help." That same week, Clara took him to a social project the company was supporting, as part of their efforts to rebuild trust with the community. Used to his corporate environment, Julian found the real-world setting uncomfortable, but also eye-opening. Sitting in a room with single mothers, survivors of abuse, and others facing adversity, he began to understand the stakes. These were lives that depended on every bit of support they received. After the meeting, an elderly woman approached him, asking if he was Mr. Julian Blake, the company's owner. When he confirmed, she told him about her son, a former employee who had been let go without warning, a decision that devastated him. Julian, feeling a pang of guilt, replied, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." The woman shook her head. "Maybe you didn't care to know, but I saw you here today, and I hope things are really changing." Julian left, feeling small and exposed. Back at the office, he found Clara and thanked her sincerely. "Today, I finally understood what you meant," he said. Clara, her gaze now softened, replied, "This is only the beginning, Julian. Change takes time, and it requires action. But over time, you may come to understand that true leadership is about service. In the weeks that followed, Julian devoted himself to the project, participating fully and learning from the team. He gradually shifted from giving orders to listening and supporting. Although the board remained cautious, they began to notice subtle shifts in Julian's approach. He was becoming more open to feedback and less impulsive, while Clara continued to observe, watching his transformation cautiously. By the end of that month, Julian began to feel at peace. For the first time, he saw the project as a mission that could positively impact many lives, not just a stepping stone to personal success. Over time, Julian's constant involvement in the project, his thoughtful questions, and his efforts to listen and understand proved he was genuinely committed. His dedication became evident, and as it did, the board's respect and trust in him grew as well. Initially, Julian attended project meetings as a mere formality, but soon these gatherings became essential to his routine. He began learning participants' names, understanding their stories, and tracking their progress. It was a world far removed from the luxurious office meetings with high-profile business people that used to fill his days. During one of these visits, Julian had a long conversation with Mary, a middle-aged woman who had lost her job and was given a second chance through the project. She opened up to him with heartfelt sincerity about the hardships she had faced and how the initiative had helped her regain her dignity. "This is more than a job to me, Mr. Julian," she said, her eyes filled with emotion. "It's a new life. For the first time, I feel like someone believes in my potential." Julian felt a lump in his throat. He wasn't merely helping one individual, he was transforming lives. Each story he heard reminded him of the impact he could have, strengthening his resolve to be worthy of the trust these people placed in him. The project was no longer a concept on paper, it had come to life. As positive outcomes began to emerge, the company's reputation soared. Board members who had once questioned Julian's ability to lead responsibly now showed signs of approval. In board meetings, he presented results with humility, highlighting the contributions of the team and underscoring Clara's crucial role. Every data point was proof that the project was making a real difference, and the board members were visibly pleased. During one meeting, Mr. Anderson, the chairman, remarked, "Julian, you're handling this project with a dedication we didn't expect. This pilot project is a success, and I believe we can expand it sustainably." Julian smiled, quietly absorbing the weight of this acknowledgement. Julian knew that Clara had been an invaluable mentor in this process, and he made sure to recognize her in every meeting. However, his admiration for her began to grow beyond the professional realm. As they spent more time together, he started seeing Clara differently. She was more than just a brilliant leader. She was a strong, compassionate woman, deeply passionate about her work. He noticed how she spoke to each project participant, the attention she gave to detail, and the respect she showed to everyone. Clara was a quiet force that inspired trust and respect. During one community visit, Julian and Clara attended a small celebration organized by the project's participants to thank the team. Observing Clara's interactions with the attendees, Julian was moved by her warmth and genuine kindness. She seemed to belong there, and everyone responded to her natural empathy. "She really understands these people," Julian thought admiringly. Clara wasn't just leading the project. She was part of it, and people sensed that. After the celebration, Julian offered to walk Clara back to the office. As they strolled through the quiet streets, he felt compelled to know more about her. Clara had always been somewhat enigmatic to him, and he was eager to understand what drove her. "Clara," he began in a softer tone, "I've always been impressed by your dedication to this project. What inspired you to get so involved?" She smiled, her face lighting up. "Julian, I've always felt the need to do something beyond myself. Growing up, I saw people around me struggle, and it left a mark. Working on something that gives others a fresh start is my way of adding meaning to my life." Her words resonated with Julian in an unexpected way. For him, this project had been about building his reputation and legacy, but for Clara, it was a personal mission. In that moment, he began to understand the depth of the extraordinary woman beside him. In the following weeks, Julian and Clara's partnership grew closer and more relaxed. What had once been formal and reserved turned into a bond of mutual admiration and trust. They shared ideas, discussed strategies, and supported each other's decisions. But Julian realized something profound was shifting within him. He didn't just admire Clara, he was beginning to fall in love with her. This revelation took him by surprise. Always cautious and skeptical about workplace relationships, he found himself thinking about Clara often, looking for reasons to be near her, just to see her smile. Clara was a steady, reassuring presence who challenged him to be better. One night, after a long meeting discussing the project's future, their conversation veered from professional to personal. Julian took the opportunity to express his gratitude. "Clara, I owe you so much. You've taught me more in these past months than I've learned in years. I used to think success was all about control and expansion, but you showed me the real value of creating something that truly matters." Clara looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his words. "It means a lot to me to hear that, Julian. Watching this change in you has been one of the most rewarding things I've experienced." Their eyes met, and a subtle but undeniable tension filled the air. Julian felt a desire to move closer, but hesitated, not wanting to overstep the boundaries of their professional relationship. Still, he knew his feelings for Clara were real. As time passed, Julian found himself drawn to Clara even more deeply. He noticed the little things about her, the way she smiled when talking about something meaningful, how she inspired everyone around her, and the conviction with which she defended the project's mission. Clara was someone who brought a sense of purpose to his life that he had never felt before. One particularly long night, while they reviewed reports together, Julian found himself blurting out, "You know, you're one of the most amazing people I've ever met." Clara laughed softly, surprised by his candidness. "Thank you, Julian, but you've changed a lot too. You've become someone truly admirable." Her words struck a chord in him, and he realized he was indeed in love. It wasn't a passing attraction. It was a profound admiration and desire to share his life's mission with Clara. In the end, Julian and Clara found not only love, but a shared vision for a more compassionate and purposeful world. Together, they led their company with integrity, setting a powerful example of ethical leadership that resonated across industries. Their impact extended beyond business. They touched lives, uplifted communities, and inspired countless others to believe in the power of second chances and transformative growth. As time went on, Julian and Clara became mentors to others, guiding young leaders to prioritize people over profits and championing projects that brought hope and opportunity to those who needed it most. Their efforts were widely recognized, but they remained grounded, knowing that their greatest reward was the positive change they were making. Years later, as they looked back on their journey, Julian reflected on how far he had come, grateful that Clara had seen his potential and shown him a new path. Clara, too, was thankful for the journey that had brought them together and allowed them to create something truly meaningful. Their story became a testament to the transformative power of love, resilience, and purpose. They had built a legacy that would live on, inspiring future generations to lead with compassion and dedication. And so, side by side, they continued their work, knowing that together they could face anything the future held. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more video. Welcome to today's story. This is a deeply meaningful tale about healing, love, and the power of hope. It shows that even the wealthiest and most powerful people cannot escape the pain of loss and the weight of guilt. Overcoming loss is never easy, but loving and opening up once more can help us rediscover joy and meaning in life. Stay tuned until the end of the video, and don't forget to share your thoughts on whether true love can heal even the deepest wounds. Now let's dive into the story. The Carter Mansion, a grand and imposing architectural marvel, stood tall amidst a vast expanse of land in Boston, cloaked in an aura of cold solitude that mirrored its unyielding gray stone walls. Bare tree branches rustled in the winter wind, and the howling gusts echoed through the empty hallways, creating a chilling symphony. A somber atmosphere enveloped the entire place, as if the house itself bore an unshakable sorrow. Julian Carter, the mansion's owner, was a wealthy and powerful man, yet he carried the burden of a soul weighed down by pain and regret. In the large office on the upper floor, he often sat for hours, staring blankly out the massive window, seeing nothing in particular. His long, calloused fingers, worn from years of work, would clutch the armrest of his chair as if to hold himself together. Beneath his cold, stoic exterior, Julian carried a wound that had never healed. The indescribable trauma of losing his beloved wife, Elise, in a car accident shrouded in mystery. The pain of losing Elise was not just a painful memory, but a constant weight of lingering guilt. Julian couldn't stop blaming himself for failing to protect the woman he loved more than his own life. The remorse consumed his mind, leaving him gripped by the fear that something similar could happen to his son, Noah. Noah, a boy with deep blue eyes, just like his mother's, was all he had left of Elise, but he was also afflicted with a life-threatening illness. Julian was obsessed with keeping Noah safe, not only physically but also emotionally. He tried to shield his son from the pain of losing his mother, avoiding any mention of painful memories, as if hiding the truth could prevent the emotional wounds that he himself still carried. Under Julian's strict control, the Carter mansion had become a fortress, laden with security measures and equipped with surveillance cameras in every room. Julian lived in a state of constant vigilance, trusting no one but himself. Nannies came and went within months, none able to ease his worries or provide Noah with the stability he needed. However, on one gloomy winter day, when pale sunlight broke through the thick clouds, Julian received the resume of a new applicant. Clara Diaz, a nanny with an impressive background and extensive experience caring for seriously ill children, entered their lives. Clara's warm smile in the attached photograph and her admirable accomplishments made Julian hesitate for a moment, but he still didn't dare to hope. To him, hiring a new nanny was merely a duty. Little did he know Clara would bring changes he had never anticipated, transformations not only in Noah's life, but also within Julian's own frozen heart. The interview took place in the grand living room of the Carter mansion. Julian sat at the head of the long oak table, his gaze stern and cautious. Across from him was Clara Diaz, a young woman with a calm demeanor and deep brown eyes that exuded an unusual confidence. She wore a simple yet elegant navy blue dress, emanating professionalism. Clara showed no signs of fear or hesitation in the heavy atmosphere of the mansion, something that few applicants had managed to do. Julian carefully observed her, trying to detect any sign of unreliability. "Miss Diaz," he began, his voice cold and devoid of emotion, "your resume is quite impressive. Caring for children with serious illnesses is a difficult job that requires a high level of patience. Do you believe you're capable of working in such a high-pressure environment?" Clara maintained steady eye contact, unwavering under the harsh scrutiny. "Mr. Carter," she replied, her voice warm yet firm, "I don't believe anyone can be fully prepared for a responsibility like this, but I trust in my dedication and perseverance. I've learned that caregiving isn't just a duty, but a journey to understand and connect with children who need love." Julian leaned forward slightly, narrowing his eyes. He had heard countless promises of excellence, but Clara's answer wasn't exaggerated or overly eager to impress. She was simply genuine, and that made him feel uneasy. "Are you aware that there are surveillance cameras installed throughout this house, even in Noah's room?" he emphasized, challenging her with an icy stare. "Privacy will be very limited." Clara didn't waver. "I understand the necessity of such security measures, especially when Noah needs to be protected," she replied calmly. "If I were in your position, I'd likely do the same. But I hope that over time I can prove that trust doesn't need surveillance. It's built through actions." Her response stirred a strange emotion in Julian, as if she was testing him instead of the other way around. He didn't like that. He didn't like feeling unsettled by a stranger, no matter how sincere she seemed. Yet a small part of him couldn't deny that Clara was different, and it was this difference that left him feeling conflicted. Sophia, Julian's loyal assistant, stood quietly near the doorway. She had worked for the Carter family for many years, and rarely saw Julian display signs of discomfort like he did now. Sophia gave a discreet cough, as if to remind him that the interview time was running out. "Miss Diaz, thank you for coming," Julian said, trying to regain his cold composure. "I'll consider it and be in touch." Clara smiled, but it wasn't a smile of expectation or worry. It was a simple, warm smile, like the first ray of sunlight shining into a cold, lonely house. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity," she said, then stood up and left the room. As Clara walked away, Julian sat quietly, a feeling of inexplicable conflict creeping into his heart. The next day, Clara officially started her job. The morning was foggy, and the pale light filtered through the large windows, casting a soft glow on Noah's small face as he lay on the bed wrapped in a cozy blanket. Noah had bright blue eyes like two clear crystals, but they were filled with sadness. His persistent cough had left his face gaunt and frail. Clara quietly entered the room, her presence gentle and unobtrusive. She sat down beside Noah, her eyes full of kindness. "Hello, Noah," she spoke, her voice as soft as a whisper, but carrying a special sincerity. "I'm Clara. Today I thought we could do something a little more fun. Do you like the ocean?" Noah looked at her, his eyes wary and skeptical. He was used to nannies coming and going, and he didn't see any reason to connect with someone new. But Clara didn't seem discouraged. "I have a story about whales that sing under the ocean. Would you like to hear it?" she asked, her voice like a soothing lullaby. A hint of curiosity flickered in Noah's eyes. He nodded slightly, and Clara began to tell the story. She spoke of humpback whales, gentle giants singing deep and resonant songs that traveled through the blue waters. As she told the tale, Clara skillfully incorporated breathing exercises into the story, turning the tedious medical routines into a playful activity. "Now, Noah, imagine you're a whale. Take a deep breath, and then let it out slowly, letting the melody drift far across the ocean." At first hesitant, Noah started to follow along. He didn't realize he was doing one of the essential therapy exercises. He simply felt like a boy playing an underwater game. A small smile gradually formed on his lips, and for the first time in months, he let out a soft giggle. It was a sound Julian hadn't heard since Elise's passing. From the doorway, Julian stood silently, watching with a tightening in his chest. He had grown accustomed to keeping his distance, observing everything through the security monitors. But now he witnessed Noah smile, something he had thought impossible. Part of him wanted to thank Clara, but another part felt uneasy. Would her presence bring something truly good, or would it just be the beginning of emotions he couldn't control? Julian turned away, the internal conflict still gripping his mind. He couldn't deny that Clara had brought something special to Noah. But could he trust in this miracle? Or was he setting himself up for another round of heartbreaking loss? He didn't know. Yet deep within his heart, a small spark of hope had begun to ignite. Clara had brought a fresh breeze to the Carter mansion, a place once heavy with silence and sorrow. Little but meaningful changes gradually appeared, like rays of sunlight breaking through the dark veil. Noah, the once withdrawn and quiet boy, started to find joy again in simple yet love-filled moments Clara created. In the morning, instead of the dull breathing exercises that Noah used to hate, Clara turned them into little adventures. They pretended to be captains conquering the ocean, and each time Noah took a deep breath, he imagined himself diving into the waves. "Take a deep breath, Captain," Clara encouraged. "We need strength to get through the big storm." Noah burst out laughing, and his laughter filled the room, soothing the worries that had always weighed heavily in the atmosphere of the house. In the afternoons, Clara took Noah out to the back garden, where yellow leaves covered the ground. She didn't just focus on Noah's physical well-being, but also helped him enjoy moments of genuine childhood. They collected leaves and played treasure hunts with stones painted to look like little gems. Once, Clara told Noah stories from Greek mythology, and he delighted in pretending to be heroes like Hercules, bravely overcoming every challenge. Noah, who used to be frail and often felt lonely, was now beginning to shine with a smile that Julian had thought he would never see again. Julian couldn't help but notice these changes. At first, he only watched through the security camera system, not allowing himself to join in. He sat in his office, looking at the screen, displaying Clara and Noah laughing together, and his heart clenched. Every time Noah smiled or laughed out loud, Julian felt a fleeting joy, followed immediately by an anxiety he couldn't shake. He feared that if he let himself trust, if he allowed himself to love again, it could be taken away, just as he had lost Elise. Every night after Noah had gone to sleep, Julian often sought out the places where memories of Elise still lingered. In his office, he would open a drawer and take out an old photo of Elise. She was smiling radiantly in the picture, her blue eyes full of life. "I failed to protect you," Julian whispered, his voice heavy with guilt and pain. The image of the accident, the unfulfilled promises, and the tormenting grief haunted him every night, vivid and unrelenting. Julian couldn't stop blaming himself, and that was what kept him from letting go of the fear that history could repeat itself. Even so, Clara's actions seemed to make cracks in the wall Julian had built around his heart. One day he passed through the living room and saw Clara guiding Noah through a drawing exercise. "Today we're going to draw our dreams," Clara said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. Noah picked up a colored pencil and began drawing giant whales swimming under the ocean, and a small boat where he stood at the helm, smiling. Julian stood there, quietly observing. He felt as if he were standing at a crossroads between continuing to protect Noah in an extreme way, or allowing the boy to live a full and happy life, even if it meant accepting risks. He couldn't stop thinking about what Clara had once said, that Noah needed a loving father, not an overprotective guardian obsessed with control. Yet the thought of letting go made Julian feel empty and afraid, as though he were about to lose the most important thing in his life. Clara noticed Julian's presence, and she greeted him with a smile. "Hello, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice gentle yet steady. Julian nodded slightly, unsure of how to respond. Clara always had this strange ability to make him feel both vulnerable and confused, something he didn't want to admit. But she also made him feel something else, something he couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was hope, or maybe it was the fear of being conquered. A few days later, Clara decided to organize an ocean day for Noah in the small garden behind the house. She spread out a large mat on the grass, brought out toy sea creatures, and together they created an imaginary ocean world. Noah was thrilled, and the entire afternoon passed in a symphony of laughter. Julian stood at the second-floor window, quietly watching. He couldn't deny that Clara had brought something into Noah's life that he could never have created himself. Genuine joy, a sense of peace that didn't rely on protective walls or surveillance cameras. But the conflict inside Julian continued to torment him. He was torn between trust and the fear of being hurt once again. One evening, as he sat in his office under the dim light, he realized he could no longer keep his fears at bay. He called Clara in. When she entered, Julian tried to maintain a stoic expression, but his eyes betrayed his unease. "Why do you do all of this for Noah?" Julian asked, his voice dry and strained. "You know everything could end at any moment, that no one can escape tragedy." Clara looked him straight in the eye, unafraid. "I do it because I believe that life isn't just about avoiding tragedy, but about living fully in every moment," she said. "Noah deserves to know what joy feels like, even if risks are always present. Sometimes loving means accepting the risk." Julian fell silent, unsure of how to respond. Clara's words shook the defenses he had so carefully built around his heart. In that moment, he realized that maybe the only way for Noah to truly live was to let the boy experience love and freedom, even if it meant Julian had to face his deepest fears. The feeling of conflict continued to haunt Julian, but Clara had planted a small seed of hope in him. Could he overcome his fears to let himself and Noah find happiness once more? The answer remained unclear, but the small changes Clara had brought had opened a path Julian could no longer ignore. Do you think Julian is to be blamed or pitied? Comment your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your opinion. A gloomy afternoon, gray clouds covered the sky, and the atmosphere in the Carter mansion felt heavier than ever. Clara was tidying up the paperwork in Julian's office, organizing them according to Sophia's instructions. She carefully opened a desk drawer and found a thick file marked with the word confidential. Curious and somewhat hesitant, she opened the file and immediately felt the blood in her veins freeze. It was a police report related to Elise's death. On the first page, large, bold letters seemed to stab at her eyes. Suspected sabotage of the brake system. Clara froze, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages, reading the suspicions that the accident was not merely a mishap, but could be connected to a sinister conspiracy. She had never imagined that Elise's death, a woman she only knew through Noah's stories and old photos, could harbor such a dark secret. "What are you doing?" Julian's voice rang out from the doorway, filled with anger and coldness. Clara jumped, turning to look at him. Julian stood there, his dark eyes blazing, his face tense like a storm about to break. He strode quickly toward her, snatching the file from her hands. "Who gave you permission to touch this?" His voice was sharp and cold as steel. Clara tried to steady herself. "Julian, I didn't mean to invade your privacy, she said, her voice trembling, but her gaze resolute. But why? Why didn't you tell anyone about this? Why are you keeping this terrible secret? Julian gripped the file tightly, his eyes burning with both anger and pain. You have no right to ask, he roared, his voice filled with emotions he had suppressed for years. This is my business, my family's business. You don't understand, and you have no right to intrude on my pain. Clara refused to back down. She knew this was a crucial moment, a time when she couldn't stay silent. You've built walls around yourself and Noah, but that doesn't protect anyone, she said firmly. Noah doesn't need a father consumed by fear and obsessed with safety. He needs a father who loves him, someone who can let him live and feel love, not just exist in fear. Julian stood there, silent, but the anger still surged within him. He had lived too long with guilt and pain, and now an outsider like Clara dared to challenge the way he protected his son. You don't understand, he said, his voice hoarse. Elise died because I couldn't protect her. If I let Noah face danger, if I lose him too, I couldn't live with that. You can't control everything, Clara replied, her eyes filled with pain but resolute. You can't stop every bad thing from happening, but you can give Noah a happier life, a life filled with beautiful memories instead of being trapped by your obsessions. Julian, you have to let Noah live, not just exist. Julian clenched his fists, feeling his heart being torn apart. He didn't want to hear what Clara was saying, but part of him knew she was right. He had let fear dictate his life, and now that very fear was holding his son back. He turned away, trying to hide the turmoil and confusion in his heart. Get out of here, Clara, he said, his voice hoarse, unable to meet her gaze. I don't need anyone telling me how to protect my son. Clara felt her throat tighten, but she refused to let fear silence her. If you send me away, Noah will lose someone who truly believes in him. He'll keep living in fear, and you'll keep torturing yourself, never finding peace. She stepped closer to Julian, her eyes brimming with tears. Think about it carefully, Julian. You can't keep living in pain and fear forever. Julian didn't respond. He just stood there, frozen like a statue, his eyes fixed on the old photograph of Elise on the desk. Pain, anger, and guilt swirled together, rendering him speechless. Clara looked at him one last time, her heart aching, and then turned to leave the room. The door closed behind her, leaving Julian alone, lost in the world he had trapped himself in for so many years. That night, the Boston sky was pitch black, and the rain fell relentlessly, pounding against the windows of the Carter mansion. Lightning slashed across the sky, followed by thunderous booms that shook the entire house. Julian sat in his office, clutching his fountain pen, as each clap of thunder sent a wave of unease through him. In the heavy silence, fear crept in uninvited, haunting him like the ghosts of that night when he lost Elise. Suddenly, a faint scream pierced the quiet from upstairs. Julian leaped to his feet, his heart tightening. It was Noah. He raced up the stairs two at a time, fear flooding through him. When he reached Noah's room, Clara was already there, kneeling beside the boy. Noah was gasping for air, his face pale, eyes wide with terror. Every breath he took was strained and rapid, as if his lungs couldn't get enough oxygen. Julian felt his world crumbling. Everything seemed to spin, and the fear he had been trying to avoid suddenly became his harsh reality. He stepped forward, his hands trembling, not knowing what to do other than stand there, utterly helpless. Julian, Clara called, her voice firm and clear, snapping him out of his panic. I need your help. He tried to steady himself, but his hands continued to shake. I don't know what to do, he choked out, his voice rough. Clara looked directly into his eyes, her gaze full of determination and trust. Sit down next to Noah. He needs to feel your presence. Julian hesitated, but when he saw the panic in his son's eyes, he knew he couldn't just stand there. He knelt beside Noah, pulling the boy into his arms, feeling the small, trembling body of his son. I'm here, son. I'm here, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Clara kept her voice calm as she guided them both. Julian, take a deep breath, slowly and evenly. Noah will feel your breathing and try to follow along. Julian did as she said, taking a deep breath in and exhaling slowly. At first, the boy was still gasping for air, but as he sensed the steady rhythm of his father's breathing, Noah began trying to match his own breaths. Clara gently rubbed Noah's back, her movements soothing, as she continued to encourage him to breathe in and out slowly. Outside, the storm continued to roar, but inside the small room, everything seemed to settle. Gradually, Noah's breathing grew more stable, though he was exhausted. Julian held his son tightly, his eyes red, with tears streaming down his face faster than he could wipe them away. He had always thought he was strong enough to protect Noah from every danger, but right now he felt so small and powerless. When Noah finally drifted into a weary sleep, Clara touched Julian's shoulder lightly, bringing him back from his daze. "He'll be okay," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. Julian nodded, but the fear hadn't left him. He slowly laid Noah down on the bed, adjusted the blanket, and sat by his side, his eyes never leaving his son. The room was filled only with the sound of rain against the window, Noah's faint breathing, and the heavy silence between the two adults. Julian turned to Clara, his eyes full of gratitude yet swirling with overwhelming emotions. "Thank you," he whispered. I don't know what I would have done without you." Clara gave a small, understanding smile, her eyes warm but empathetic. "Noah needs you more than anything. Just being here, loving him, and being present is enough to make him feel safe." Julian looked at Clara, and for the first time in many years, he felt something shift deeply within him. He had always tried to protect Noah with invisible walls, thinking that only control could keep his son safe. But in this moment, during such a challenging time, he realized that love wasn't about control, but about presence, about facing life's storms together. He held Noah's small hand, feeling every beat of the boy's pulse, and understood that he couldn't shield him from every danger. But he could love, he could cherish every moment, and that was what truly mattered. Clara sat down beside him, her presence a quiet source of comfort. Julian didn't know what the future held, but he felt a little less burdened. The storm outside gradually subsided, and in his heart, a small but brilliant light of hope began to emerge. He knew the journey ahead would still be full of challenges, but now he no longer felt alone. After the crisis that Noah had endured, something in Julian's heart began to change. It was as if the walls he had built around his heart were slowly cracking, and the warm light of love and acceptance was beginning to seep in. He knew he couldn't keep living in fear forever. One afternoon, as Noah sat at the dining table, Julian decided it was time to open his heart. "Noah," Julian said, his voice softer than ever. The boy looked up, his blue eyes, just like his mother's, shining with curiosity. "Have you ever wanted to hear about your mother, Elise?" Noah's eyes widened, surprised but eager. Since his mother passed away, his father had rarely spoken of her. "Yes," he whispered, his voice small but filled with hope. Julian took a deep breath, trying to suppress the pain rising in his chest. He pulled out a chair and sat beside his son, his hands resting on the table, almost trembling. "Your mother was someone special," he began, his eyes full of memories. "She loved the ocean. Whenever we walked along the beach, she would smile so brightly, and her laughter was like the waves playing along the shore." Noah went silent, absorbing every word, as if Julian's stories were opening up a world he had never known. Julian went on, recounting afternoons when Elise taught him to dance in the rain, nights when they lay on the beach gazing at the stars, and how Elise always found joy in the simplest things. His voice softened, filled with longing, but also with the warmth of a love that never faded. When Julian finished, Noah looked at his father, his eyes brimming with tears but lit with joy. "I wish I could meet her just once," Noah said, his voice breaking. Julian nodded softly, his eyes also welling up. "I wish for that too, son. But your mother is always here," he said, pointing to Noah's heart, "and she will always be a part of us." Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on meaningful videos. The stories about Elise not only helped Noah connect with the mother he never truly remembered, but also brought comfort to Julian. He realized that by sharing memories, he was not only enriching Noah's inner world, but also healing himself. The mansion, once a place of silence and sorrow, was now filled with laughter, the sound of Noah's small footsteps running through the halls, and new memories gradually taking shape. Not only did the relationship between Julian and Noah improve, but the distance between Julian and Clara also began to close. They started spending more time together, no longer just as employer and caretaker, but as two friends sharing their deepest stories. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky golden over the garden, Julian and Clara sat quietly on the porch, watching Noah play with the butterflies fluttering around the wildflowers. Julian turned to Clara, his gaze softening. "I don't know how I can ever thank you, Clara," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "You've brought light back into this house, and to Noah." He paused, his eyes drifting with hesitation. "And to me, too." Clara remained silent, but her eyes shone with emotion. "Noah is an amazing boy," she replied, trying to hide the feelings welling up. "I just want him to be happy. And Julian, you deserve to live, not just exist." Julian looked deeply into her eyes, feeling the warmth and gentleness that seemed to ease the cold within him. "But I've lost so much," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I'm afraid, so afraid, because I don't think I can bear losing someone again." Clara gently placed her hand on his, a small but comforting gesture. "I'm afraid too," she confessed, her eyes glistening with both sadness and strength. "I lost someone I loved and promised myself I wouldn't let anyone else hurt me. But if there's one thing I've learned from caring for Noah, it's that sometimes loving someone means accepting that you might get hurt." Clara had experienced profound loss in her life when her younger sister passed away from a terminal illness. Clara had spent years caring for her sister with all the love and hope she could muster, but in the end, she couldn't save the person she loved most. Her sister's passing left a deep wound in Clara's heart, a pain of loss and helplessness, making her understand not only the grief of losing someone, but also the importance of living every moment of life fully and meaningfully. That pain became Clara's motivation to care for Noah, allowing her to bring hope and light to those who needed it most, even though she was still struggling to heal her own heart. She understood the pain Julian was going through because she had faced the same. The difference was that she had learned how to begin healing. The silence between them wasn't awkward, but rather a quiet understanding between two kindred souls. Julian knew he wasn't the only one fighting pain, and that realization made him feel closer to Clara. He felt that perhaps she was the one who truly understood the fear and sorrow he carried. Noah ran over to them, his face beaming with joy. "Dad, Ms. Clara, look! There's a rainbow!" he exclaimed, pointing to the sky where a vibrant rainbow had appeared after the light rain. Julian and Clara looked up, feeling as if a miracle had just happened. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Julian realized that the rainbow wasn't just light after a storm, but a reminder that life could still be beautiful, even after all the pain. Julian gently placed his hand on Noah's shoulder, then turned to Clara, a sincere smile spreading across his face. "Maybe," he said softly, "it's time we learn to embrace life's little miracles." And in the light of the rainbow, they began building a new life together, one where love and healing could find their place, no longer overshadowed by fear and painful memories. That morning, the gentle spring sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the garden at the Carter estate with sparkling patches of light. Noah sat on the grass, giggling as Clara told him a new story about a whale adventure. Julian stood from afar, quietly observing them, feeling a rare peace seeping into his heart. But this time, the fear and doubt that used to overwhelm him were replaced by a budding determination. He knew it was time to make a decision that could change his life. Noah, with the sensitivity and intuition of a child, seemed to notice something in his father's eyes. The boy ran over, his bright blue eyes filled with curiosity. "Dad, you look like you're thinking about something again," he said innocently but with genuine concern. "Do you have something to tell Ms. Clara?" Julian smiled, his eyes filled with love. He knelt beside his son, gently ruffling his hair. "Noah, what would you think if Ms. Clara became an official part of our family? I mean, not just as a caretaker, but as someone who will stay with us forever." Noah's eyes widened, then he laughed with joy. "I would love that, Dad. I think Miss Clara would want to stay with us too. I love her, and I know Mom Elise would be happy if Miss Clara stayed with us." Noah's words made Julian's heart clench, but not out of pain. rather from a gentle sweetness, as if Elise was smiling at him from somewhere far away. He knew that love could never replace what was lost, but it could create new things, new memories to add to their family. Thank you for reading this far. Comment Coca-Cola to let us know you're still following the story. That afternoon, Julian prepared everything meticulously. He decorated the small garden behind the estate with tiny lights, creating a warm, starry atmosphere. A simple yet elegant dining table was set in the middle of blooming flowers. Noah helped his father, even carefully choosing the prettiest flowers to place in a small vase at the center of the table. "Mom Elise would definitely like this," Noah whispered, and Julian nodded, his eyes sparkling with a rare determination. As the sun began to set, Julian invited Clara out to the garden. She looked surprised when she saw the warm and romantic setup that father and son had prepared. Noah ran over to her, taking her hand with a mischievous smile. "Ms. Clara, Dad and I have something special to say," he said, his voice cheerful. Julian stepped forward, his heart racing, but not out of fear like before. He knelt down on one knee in front of Clara, his eyes looking deeply into hers, holding all the things he had never dared to say. "Clara," he said, his voice warm and sincere, "you have not only brought joy and hope to Noah, but have helped me see that life can still be beautiful, even after the greatest losses. You've revived dreams, laughter, and a heart I thought would stay frozen forever." He pulled out a small box from his pocket, opened it, and revealed a simple yet sparkling ring. "I know I'm not perfect, and I'm still learning how to love again, but I want to build a family with you and Noah, a home where we can face all challenges together. Clara Diaz, will you marry me and become an irreplaceable part of this family?" Clara was silent for a moment, her eyes welling with tears. She felt her heart melt at the unexpected but deeply meaningful proposal. She looked at Noah, who was holding his breath, his eyes full of hope, and then at Julian, the man she knew had endured so much loss, yet still found the courage to love again. After a moment of hesitation, Clara took Julian's hand, a smile spreading across her face. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I agree, not because I want to replace anyone, but because I believe love can expand our hearts to create a new family, where old and new memories can coexist together." Noah let out a joyful cheer, jumping up and hugging both of them. Julian, with tears in his eyes but a heart full of happiness, stood up and pulled Clara and Noah into his embrace. They stood there under the starry night sky, feeling the warmth of each other and knowing they had created something special, something that could never be taken away. That evening, as the three of them sat at the dinner table, the twinkling lights shining on their radiant faces, Noah whispered, "Mom Elise would be so happy, wouldn't she?" Julian smiled, holding Clara and his son's hands tightly. "Yes, she would be," he said, feeling a gentle breeze caress his face, carrying the scent of flowers and Elise's memory. Julian realized that the loss was still there, but it was no longer just pain. It had become a part of life, a part of the family they had built, were building, and would always love together. In the quiet yet warm night, the three of them felt that they had found a new home, one not just made of bricks and stone, but of memories, faith, and new love created from hearts that had healed. Winter had blanketed the Carter mansion in a pristine sheet of snow, but the air in the small garden behind the house was unusually warm. The gentle afternoon light shone through the bare branches, reflecting on the sparkling snowflakes like thousands of tiny diamonds. Blue and white ribbons were hung everywhere, swaying softly in the cold breeze. Today, the garden was no longer a place of silence and solemnity. It was full of life, laughter, and the warmth of love. Julian stood at the end of the small path covered in white petals, where in just a few minutes he would be waiting for the woman who had changed his life. He wore an elegant black suit, but his hands couldn't stop trembling. He felt his heart pounding, not from the cold but from the overwhelming excitement and hope filling his chest. Beside him, Noah, in his tiny tuxedo, was grinning happily, as if he were the main character of the ceremony. "Dad, can we start yet?" Noah turned to ask, his bright blue eyes sparkling with joy. Julian bent down, placing a hand on his son's shoulder, and smiled. "Just a little longer, Captain," he joked, using the nickname Clara often called him. Noah giggled and stood tall, proud of the important role he would play in the wedding. As the soft music began to play, all eyes turned to the main aisle. Clara appeared, wearing a simple yet elegant wedding dress with delicate lace details resembling ocean waves. Around her neck was Elise's pearl necklace, given to her by Julian as a token of gratitude, a way for Elise to always be present and bless them. Clara walked slowly, her radiant smile and tearful eyes full of emotion. Her steps were light, but each one was sure and steady, as if she had finally found her place. Julian felt his eyes sting, but he didn't try to hide his emotions. He had learned that loving didn't mean hiding or suppressing feelings, but letting beautiful moments be vivid and real. As Clara drew near, he extended his hand to welcome her. "You look beautiful," he whispered, his voice breaking. Clara smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "And you finally learned not to hide your feelings," she teased, making Julian laugh. It was a genuine, carefree laugh, something she had worked so hard to bring out in him over the past months. Noah stood between them, and when the ceremony began, he was the one to present the wedding rings. He looked up at his father and Clara, his eyes glowing with happiness and hope. "Mom would be so happy to see us like this," Noah whispered, causing both Julian and Clara to shed tears they couldn't hold back. They both bent down, embracing Noah tightly, the three of them wrapped in a circle of love. The ceremony unfolded in an intimate and warm atmosphere. Julian's close friends and family, who had witnessed his pain and recovery, were there to give their blessings. The wedding wasn't just the union of two people, but a healing and rebuilding of what had been broken and lost. The walls of Carter Mansion, once echoing with tears and sorrow, now reflected the laughter and joy of a family reborn. After the ceremony ended, the three of them strolled around the garden. Snow fell gently on their shoulders, but none of them felt the cold. Julian held Clara's hand, while Noah ran ahead, leaving little footprints in the white snow. They approached a small corner of the garden, where a little whale statue had been placed to honor Noah's dreams of the ocean. Julian placed a hand on the statue as if to feel Elise's warmth. "Elise," he whispered, "I hope you see this. We've found happiness, and Noah is still living his dreams, strong and free, just like you wanted." Clara stood beside him, feeling the blend of sorrow and joy. "She'll always be here," Clara said softly, placing her hand over Julian's. "But we also have the right to move forward and create new memories, not to replace, but to enrich the ones we already have." Julian turned to Clara and Noah, his gaze free of shadows or worry. He realized that this journey wasn't about forgetting the past, but about learning to live fully, love deeply, and allow himself to be happy. That was what Elise would have always wanted. Hand in hand, they left the garden, ready to create new memories together. Carter Mansion, once a symbol of solitude and grief, was now full of life. In the days to come, Noah and Clara's laughter would echo through the halls, erasing the silence that had once suffocated the house. Julian knew that they would face challenges together, but this time, he was no longer afraid. He had learned to love and accept, and that made him stronger than ever. That winter was no longer as cold as those before. It was a winter of healing, of love, and of a family reborn. Elise, though gone, would always be an irreplaceable part of their lives, while Clara and Noah would continue this story, writing new chapters full of hope. How did you like the story? Rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments. And don't forget to share which city you watched the video from so we know where our story has reached around the world. Also, we want to remind you to hit that subscribe button to give us more motivation to create meaningful and heartwarming content. Don't forget to like and share the video with your friends.